Welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Loudmouth Luke, and today we are looking at an album by a band that I used to hate that, in places, has kind of grown on me. Today we're taking a look at the third studio album of Montreal-based pop-punk band Simple Plan with their self-titled album. But before we discuss it, I think it's best we talk about my history with the band. When I was first getting into music, especially rock and alternative, I used to watch a lot of music critics, and I often tended to just copy their opinions on bands and albums, even if deep down I enjoyed them or disagreed with those takes. Specifically, I remember there was one band that all my favorites seemed to dislike, Simple Plan. Many of them citing their music as incredibly whiny, melodramatic, insanely boring, and substanceless. And because of this, I kinda hated them by default. Although, aside from a few tracks, I never really checked their music out. Ironically enough, I did like a few songs, but I often stayed away from listening to them until last year. For context, one of my friends got tickets to see Avril Lavigne in St. Louis, and I rarely say no to concerts, so I told him I'd go with him. Like I always do, I always make playlists to prepare for shows with the full lineup and everything. And aside from Avril, the other bands that were playing were We the Kings, who already had a few songs I liked, and Simple Plan. And around this time, I decided to become less reliant on music critics, especially since a lot of them have a lot of takes I don't really agree with. So I felt like this was a good time to finally give Simple Plan a chance, and shockingly, I kinda liked their music. Now, first and foremost, I do think the criticism of their music is valid. I think there are many better pop-punk bands, and their songwriting is very corny at times. But despite that, I think a lot of their music is fun. And in a lot of respects, it reminds me of a time when I was a kid and I didn't have many obligations. Like the worst thing in my life was like my parents not taking me to the mall that day or something. Despite not really listening to them growing up, I feel like their music is very nostalgic. I especially gained a little more appreciation for them after seeing them at the Avril show. Their set was genuinely so much fun, and I almost bought a t-shirt after the show. Their set was that good. Also, a month later, their documentary came out, and it gave me a little more insight into their career and the writing process of some of their songs. With all that being said, I wouldn't really consider myself a fan, but I do think they're a pretty decent band, all things considered. Now, regarding this album, this was at a weird point in their career. This album was released in 2008, and around the time, pop-punk and emo music had lost a lot of chart relevancy. Because of this, the band decided to mix some elements of pop and hip-hop of the time into their sound, and trying to sound more mature, which in a lot of respects rarely ever works well for bands that try to do that. But with all that being said, we'll see if they succeed. This is Simple Plan's self-titled. The first track is When I'm Gone, and it's a pretty good start to the album. It gives you a good impression of what the album is going to sound like, starting off with this little synth key part, and also then this audio sample playing. Which I guess could be interpreted two ways, with the first being the change in style, and the second being the meaning of the song, which we'll get to in a minute. After that, the main thing that I notice is Pierre's vocals aren't as nasally as they are in their first two albums.
I'm trying to forget that I'm addicted to you, but I want it and I need it. I'm addicted to you. Now I look around me, but all I seem to see is people going nowhere, expecting sympathy.
Now, getting to the attempted maturity of the first track, I feel like this isn't really much of a difference in lyrical content, although I will say I don't think there is that same, like, woe is me, I have the worst life ever mentality that a lot of their lyrics have. So I would say there's a slight point there, but again, with subject matter, it's not really anything too far removed. Simple Plan's lyrics are often typically pretty forward in its messaging, and there's often a lack of metaphors or symbolism, so I feel like there's not really much to decode here. It's the 20 millionth pop-punk song about why your hometown sucks and how we gotta move to truly find who we are.
Tell me where's our inspiration? If life won't wait, I guess it's up to me. Whoa, no, we're not
me personally, this isn't one of my faves in that regard, but I think it's okay. The instrumental isn't really much to write home about, even with some of the poppier elements, it's kind of just fine. I think overall it's an okay track, so let's get to the next one. Up next is Take My Hand, and it's okay. I do like the riff in the intro. It's hard to explain why, to be honest, but I just kinda like it. Lyrically, this song again seems to be like what I'd expect from this band. Like the last track, there isn't really much here that strikes me as trying to be more mature. Although with that said, I don't exactly dislike the lyrics. They seem to be about chasing love in tough times of life.
Sometimes I feel like everybody's got a problem. Sometimes I feel like nobody wants to solve them. I know that people say we're never gonna make it, but I know we're gonna get through this.
It's very surface level, but not everything needs to be super deep. I think the instrumental is okay, just like the last track. It's a very stock alt-rock sounding song, but I do like the little beeps from the synths. Once again, it's nothing extraordinary, but it's nothing outright bad either. Although I do like that little switch up in the bridge, something about it just sounds really cool. It's overall another pretty decent track, and up next, I would say, is one of the more interesting tracks. Up next is The End, and it's once again pretty decent. It starts off with kind of this electro-pop vibe in the verses of the track.
I've been trying to tell you something, but you never understand. I feel like we've been going round in circles.
Before speeding up and getting a lot more pop-punky in the chorus. Lyrically, this track is about a rocky relationship that the narrator doesn't want to give up on, and I think that the execution isn't awful for me, but it's hard to make this kind of subject work without it coming off as cringy or desperate. And while I feel like this track doesn't necessarily do either of these things, for some reason it just feels awkward to me. Again, I do see a step up in writing for the band since it doesn't seem to have that whiny, angsty framing many of the tracks on their first two albums have, so I do think it succeeds in trying to be more mature, but again, this isn't really anything to write home about. But regardless, I think it's another okay track, so let's see what's up next. Up next is Your Love Is a Lie, and I think it's one of the more solid tracks, but it has a couple issues. I will say I like the instrumental. It's pretty solid. I like the acoustic guitar in the chorus and in the verses, and I like the ending parts of the chorus in the latter half of the track. I also think the clap drums in the verses aren't awful. They're not really jarring or anything. However, I think using like actual drums, or at least something that sounded like actual drums, would have sounded a little better. Although I think that the use of actual drums in the chorus does give it more of a punch. So I think it's more of a stylistic choice than anything. This song is about cheating, yay! And I think the way it's framed is mostly fine. Many of the other songs about cheating have a lot more like anger in the lyrics and in the instrumentation. And while that's mostly here, I feel like in some ways it's meant to emphasize that feeling of sadness or difficulty grasping that feeling of being cheated on.
I found a note with another name. You blow a kiss, but it just don't feel the same, 'cause I can feel that you're gone.
So I think in that regard, I would say it's a little different in framing, but I think it does have that same theme of just being upset about it. Overall, I do think it's one of the more solid tracks on the album, and up next I think is one of the more impactful songs that Simple Plan has ever recorded.
Take a breath, I pull myself together, just another step, until I reach the door you'll never know.
Up next is Save You, and I think this song is beautiful. This song is about feelings vocalist Pierre dealt with as his brother was battling cancer.
I wish that I could tell you something to take it all away. Sometimes I wish I could save you, and there's so many things that I want you to know. I won't give up till it's over. If it takes you.
It truly shows that feeling of hopelessness he had as his brother Jay battled cancer. It captures that feeling of hopelessness and fear really well, especially since a lot of people can relate to that, because you still want to try your best to be there for someone and help them as much as you can, even if it's not a cure.
If you fall, stumble down, I'll pick you up off the ground. If you lose faith in you, I'll give you strength to pull through. Tell me you won't give up, 'cause I'll be waiting if you fall. You know I'll be there for you.
This track did make me a little interested to see how Pierre's brother is doing now, and I did a little digging, and thankfully Jay's beaten cancer since this track's release. And all the money from the track went to the band's foundation that helps with mental health, medical research, and just overall, just good stuff. I think this is easily one of the best tracks on the album, and probably one of my favorite songs the band has ever recorded. So let's see if the next track can match the impact of Save You. Up next is My Generation, and it's one of the weaker attempts at mixing pop with the pop-punkier style of the band, although I do think it's okay overall. The trumpets, for me anyways, lack that feeling of grandiose and epicness they should have. I think there should have been more instruments involved in that part, like maybe some other brass instruments. I can hear some, but they aren't loud enough in the mix to really make it feel as impactful as it should be. And for some reason, in a way, this reminds me of 4 Minutes by Madonna. Like, I know he was a huge producer at the time, but man, I can hear the influence of Timbaland's production on this album. In regards to the rest of the instrumentation, I like the energy the rest of it has, especially in the chorus, where it kind of speeds up.
So listen up, that's my generation. Hey ho, let's go. It's going down tonight. Hey ho, let's go. We're gonna do it till we die. 'Cause I've got no reason to apologize. That's my generation.
Lyrically, this song is whatever. It's one of those, my generation is gonna rise up and become the greatest songs, and a lot of those songs don't really do a lot for me. Even the ones I like, I often don't have that like fist in the air feeling it wants to have, unless the instrumental just rocks. With this track, it does have a pretty energetic chorus, so it nearly succeeds in that regard, but again, it doesn't really do a lot for me. Either way, despite its issues, I think it's a pretty decent track, so let's see what's up next.
I just don't wanna waste another day. I'm trying to make things right, but to shut
Say Goodbye is kind of a step back from the rest of the album, mainly since it reminds me of a lot of Simple Plan's earlier work, which in a way feels kind of like a slap in the face to some of the previous tracks. Lyrically and instrumentally, it's very reminiscent of their last album, Still Not Getting Any, which had that whiny, woe is me mentality in the lyrics, even on some of the songs I like. And while this track doesn't fully have it, it kinda does in places. It almost makes me wonder if this track was one of the first ones they recorded, or if it was a B-side from their last album. Instrumentally, this track is nothing special, it's a very stock pop-punk instrumental, but with that being said, I don't really mind it. I think it's a pretty fun track to listen to overall. Lyrically, this song is about a toxic breakup, and again, I feel like it's a very stock track in that regard, but again, nothing about it is outwardly offensively bad or anything. Overall, it's an okay track, so let's get to the next one.
You look so beautiful today. When you're sitting there, it's hard for me to look away. So I try to find the words that I could say.
Up next is I Can Wait Forever, and I think it's alright, but I do think that the lyrics in the song are very sweet. Lyrically, this song seems to be about a long-distance relationship and the bittersweet feelings involved with being so far away from someone you love.
Come back home to see your face tonight, 'cause I just can't take it. Another day without you with me. It's like a blade that cuts right through me. But I can wait forever.
However, I do think this track could be about the band missing their significant others while on tour, but I think it could be interpreted both ways, which, for me personally, I love songs that do that, whether it's intentional or not. I also like that little solo near the end of the song. There's nothing too crazy, but it's just nice, and it complements the song really well. It's overall a pretty decent track, so let's get to the next one. Up next is Holding On, and it's another okay track. The instrumental is pretty boring. For some reason, it kind of reminds me of Phil Collins' music he did for the Tarzan soundtrack. Lyrically, this track is nothing to write home about. It's about staying hopeful and motivated in tough times, and I think, again, it's nothing crazy, but it's decent enough. Either way, this track does nothing for me, especially lyrically or with the actual music. And I will say though, that weird rap thing in the verses is unintentionally a little funny. Like, guys, we have Linkin Park at home. Regardless, I find this song really mediocre, so let's see what's up next. Up next is No Love, and it's a pretty solid track. I think lyrically, this song really packs a punch, dealing with the themes of someone trapped in a toxic or an abusive relationship.
Staring out into the world across the street. You hate the way your life turned out to be. He's pulling up in the driveway and you don't make a sound. 'Cause you always learn to hold the things you want to say. You're always gonna be afraid.
I think similarly to Save You, it truly makes you feel for the character in the story. You really get a glimpse into that isolation and fear. As the song goes on, the feeling I got was gut-wrenching. It makes me sad knowing how many people have dealt with a relationship like this. I think it's a really great track with a lot of emotional power, but I will say it's a pretty hard track to sit through for those who've been through similar things in the lyrics. Regardless, we got one track left, so let's see if SP3 goes out with a bang. The final track of the album is What If, and I have really mixed feelings about it. I do really like the instrumental, mainly from the lead section. I always forget to talk about this, but I think their guitarist, Jeff Stinko, if I'm pronouncing that right, is a really good guitarist. I've seen live clips and he can rip on guitar, but you wouldn't really know that listening to Simple Plan. I feel like as a guitarist, that's kind of a double-edged sword, since on one hand, it shows you know what a song does and doesn't need, but on the other hand, I feel like you should try to show off your skill as a musician when you can. Regardless, lyrically, this song doesn't really do a lot for me. It has a theme I really relate to, which is being anxious about your future and your fear of letting people down.
What if I change the world? If I lead the way? What if I'll be the one that takes the blame? What if I can't go on without you? What if I graduate? What if I don't? What if I don't?
But I think, like a lot of Simple Plan's writing, it's very surface level, and I feel like he doesn't really do a lot with the subject. Overall, it's kind of a mediocre song, and it doesn't really feel like the best way to end the album. Simple Plan's self-titled is an interesting project to say the least, although I do think it is just kinda okay overall. I think overall there was a clear effort to reinvent themselves in the project, and for the most part, I think it mostly succeeds. It doesn't really reek of a band trying to be relevant, even if the poppier elements can be a little jarring at times. I think for the most part, they also succeeded at approaching topics in a more mature frame, although I do think a few tracks seem more of the same lyrically for the band. With all that being said, Simple Plan's self-titled gets a 5 out of 10. There are a few tracks I like, and I do think they really improved as musicians and especially as songwriters on this album, but most of the album doesn't really do a lot for me. Well, that wraps up another episode of For the Record. If anyone wants to request an album for me to review, my email is lukeeboyer03@gmail.com, or you can message me on Instagram at loudmouthluke03. Thank you all for tuning in, and I hope you have a great night.